And call the order of the BZA for March 29th. If you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. I'll give you a brief explanation of tonight's procedures. We will hear the appeal from our staff as a presentation. The appellant will then have an opportunity to speak. Then anyone in favor or opposition will have the opportunity to speak. After that, our board will ask for the public portion to be closed. We then, at that point, will have the opportunity to call anyone forward that spoke before us this evening and ask them questions pertaining to tonight's appeal. After that, we will have just some general business, and you're not obligated to stay for the entire meeting, but if you choose to do so, you're more than welcome to stay. At this point, can we get a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Owens?
Present.
Mr. Bartle?
Here.
Mr. Shupp?
Here.
Mr. Saito?
Here.
Mr. Roberto?
Present. Okay, so I got next will be oaths. Nobody to swear in the office?
Not this week.
We will have those people that are going to be speaking tonight. If you would please stand and raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth before the Board of Zoning Appeals? Say I do.
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated. So for this first case, Mr. Shupp has asked to be excused. There is a conflict of interest, and so we'll ask him to leave the meeting. We'll ask for the alternate to be called forward, and then we will bring Mr. Shupp back in for the second case. And remind me, guys, to bring him back in.
I'll do that for you.
Thank you.
I didn't bring you back in that time, and I didn't want to say.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking to remind me.
Right.
Let it be shown that Mr. DeMoss has taken our alternate position to the board.
Good.
Okay, so our first case this evening would be BZA 2023-02. The property owner is requesting a variance to 10.3.1 subsection F and 10.3.1 subsection M and 10.3.2 subsection A from the Colerain Township zoning resolution. Property located at 6495 Springdale Road, parcel number 510-0350-002000, and the applicant and property owner is Alan and Janet Cobbs. Does the staff have a presentation?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So as you stated, this is the BZA case 2023-02. The property owner is requesting a set of variances from 10.3.1F, 10.3.1M, and 10.3.2A. Property is located at 6495 Springdale, and the applicant owner is Alan and Janet Cobb. The property itself is located in the southwest region of Colerain Township, off of Springdale. Here's a vicinity map kind of showing the streets that it's near. It is a pretty large property. It's almost 7.5 acres. The zoning in the vicinity, you can see that it's very heavy residential, completely immersed in residential R3. Property map kind of just showing property lines in relation to the property. You can see that there is significant topography changes. It's quite hilly in that area. I was able to drive out there this afternoon and got to experience it firsthand. It is quite hilly. Here's a Google Street View of the property coming from the north, heading south. This is more the midpoint of the property. You can see the house itself. And then it's from the south coming north, you'd see this view. So the applicable zoning regulations is going to be the ones that the applicant is requesting a variance from, relating to home occupations in the general provisions and in the prohibited home occupation section as well. More or less what it's stating, and F is saying that anybody that is not related to the owner of the dwelling or of the property cannot be employed. And then no accessory building could be used for the home occupation. And the proposed business at this residence is a landscaping business, which is prohibited as spelled out in 10.3.2A. So they're requesting a variance from that as well.
Okay.
So the proposed plan is to utilize a portion of the pole barn accessory structure in the rear for his son's landscaping business, and a portion of the residence for the administrative office aspects to the landscaping business. This is a submitted site plan, kind of indication. It's kind of, I'll just skip ahead. This was kind of my rendition of it was kind of whitewashed a little bit when it got scanned in, I think. So there's the portion of the residence that would be used for that home office. Then there's the accessory structure in the rear portion of the yard. So as you see every meeting, the variance review criteria for you kind of spelled out in 4.4.2. And then as we've been acclimating more to utilizing Duncan factors when looking at these cases, it kind of spelled out for you and was in your packets as well. So staff findings, it's staff's opinion that the property in question will yield a reasonable return without the expansion of the use. It is staff's opinion that the request itself is substantial in nature. It is staff's opinion that the essential character of the neighborhood would be substantially altered, or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the expansion of the use. It is staff's opinion that the granting of the expansion of the use would not adversely, the granting of the variance would not adversely affect governmental services. It is staff's opinion that the property owner who purchased the property did not have knowledge of the zoning restrictions. It is staff's opinion that property owner's predicament feasibly can be obviated through some other method other than the variances. It is staff's opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would not be observed. Substantial justice done by granting the variances. With that, since it was not via, I would say through staff's interpretation of our variance for review criteria and the Duncan factors, it is staff's recommendation to deny the request as it did not seem to meet those guidelines. And that concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you. Is the applicant present? Give a presentation. Please, yeah, just please come to the podium, and whatever you want to present is up to you. State your name and name and address for the record, please.
Alan Cobbs, 6495 Springdale Road.
Thank you.
I guess I didn't think, I thought this might be read. Can I
It's your time.
Can I understand that everybody in the board has read this, or?
We received your packet that had your letter in here stating why you were doing what you were doing and what your intent was, yes.
Okay.
And everyone has had an opportunity to read it, correct? So we have it in evidence, yes, sir.
Okay. Well, then I'm not gonna reread it, or maybe I can see there are people here that,
Well, what you're also reading to is you're also reading to an audience that's beyond the scope of this space.
okay.
So Colerain Township will be seeing this as well, so it's up to you how you want to present
Yeah,
your case.
maybe I should read it.
It's all right?
Oh, my. All right. I've always had a desire for a large property with plenty of space and a 10-car garage, in my words. My wife and I have 5 children, all married with spouses, so you can understand growing up with this size of a family in a 3-bedroom home left us no space in a small garage to park or work on cars. I always had to do this in the cold or in the rain. I moved to Colerain Township, and thanks to the zoning and planning, I was able to build a big garage, enough to facilitate my dream. My 24 by 50 foot building, although not my exaggerated dream, but certainly big enough to accomplish what I desired as far as parking cars out of the weather and working on equipment and cars regardless of the weather. I could see several places on Springdale where tree removal equipment and lawn care equipment were stored on properties along the road. I knew that we were not allowed to run a business from our property, but I was unaware that storing landscape equipment or having employees pick up that equipment constituted running a business. I also knew that an upholstery shop was run out of the barn on this property. This also added to my confusion about what was allowed on our property. I started Cobb's Care about 20 years ago, and my oldest son wanted to take over the business. I tried my best to persuade him to follow his college training, but he would not be dissuaded. So he has slowly taken over the business, and I have very little activity in the business currently. I do help him save money with equipment repairs, vehicle repairs, and a few administrative tasks. My stake in the business has afforded me the ability to use all of the Cobb's Care equipment and vehicles. Now owning a large property, this use is more important than ever. It is my understanding that storing equipment that I use personally is not a violation of the zoning code. I would think that working on vehicles and equipment that I use personally on my property would also not be a code violation. My son is trying to expand the business beyond myself, my oldest son, Kyle, and youngest son, Jesse. I don't think the three of us parking here and taking equipment out is a code violation, but if it is, I would like a variance for this activity. Kyle is trying to hire employees, but is having difficulty finding employees with good driving records, no drug use, and a good work ethic, and a good sense of responsibility. He has hired 8 employees, not all at once, and has had all but 2 quit or get fired. So I don't think that he will be able to expand his business, and I don't think he will be able to keep his business afloat if he continues to be unable to find good help. I have no desire to make this a large gathering place for Cobb's Care employees. Kyle understands that. If his business does expand much further, he will need to find a bigger place for storing some equipment and having employees pick up the equipment from that location. I would also like to make it clear that I have no desire to have customers come to our property for any reason. So I would like to know that I will not be written up for a code violation when I store equipment I use personally on my property. I would like to know that I will not be written up for my children and their spouses parking on my property. That is 10 people. I would like a variance for up to 8 employees to park in our parking area behind our barn that has a lean-to garage. I don't believe this causes an eyesore or any significant amount of traffic. I would like my son and I to be able to use a small space in our house as a home office. I have illustrated the 10-foot by 10-foot space in the house for the use. I am unsure if I need to specify how much of our 24 by 50-foot building, an illustration of the dimensions and the location of the building are included, will be used to store Cobb's Care equipment. That I use personally. I don't believe it will exceed 20%, especially if you consider things that I own personally that will be used by Cobb's Care. I believe this will save my son at least $12,000 per year for storage and easily $10,000 a year in repairs. I believe it will help my son with his equipment to expand the business to include employees, and if he is successful, he will move into a commercial building. I am unable to calculate how much the storing of this equipment will save me in maintenance of our 7.39 acres. I personally think it is priceless. I hope you will consider all of this when evaluating my appeal for a variance. I'm certainly open to suggestions that might make this variance more acceptable. I do know that I have spoken personally with both of our adjacent neighbors, and they have no problem with what we are doing on our property. I do see one of my adjacent neighbors here, so I guess they haven't expressed to me what their concerns are. Maybe they just want to find out what the variance is going to allow and if that is objectionable to them. I'm hoping that's the case. I know that the zoning and planning is here to make sure people are good neighbors. I want to be a good neighbor. My wife wants to be a good neighbor. My son wants to be a good neighbor. And before we moved to Springdale, we lived on a cul-de-sac in Finneytown. And we lived, our driveway barely fit 4 cars, and you had to jam them in there. 2 cars wide, maybe 2 cars deep. And we had all of this equipment over there. And everybody knew I was a good neighbor. I'd do anything for my neighbors. And if they had a problem with anything I was doing, they could come to me and we could talk about it, and I would make sure that what we were doing was not offensive to them. That's my desire here today. But I'm sorry. But I have a son that's struggling to get this business going. And in this current labor market, it's extremely difficult to find a good employee. And I don't know if he's going to make this business a go. I know he's struggling to find good employees. And I want to give him a safe space to learn how to hire good employees. The ones he has hired have not been, destructive personalities or somebody in the neighborhood needs to worry about, but they've been lazy or, caused damage to his trucks or his equipment. But, I told Kyle this is what I was going to do, and he said, well, Dad, don't give them a sob story. And I said, well, I don't want to do that. It does feel like I'm doing that, but I don't want to do that. But I said, Kyle, I want them to know you need this. And he said, I do need this. I mean, my son Jesse, he's like the only employee that by code is allowed there. I mean, I may be wrong, but I believe equipment I use personally is allowed there. So the office space in my house, the additional up to 8 employees, I mean, I'm flexible on that, but I really don't want to offend my neighbors. But I feel like the only difference is I've gotten my dream garage, and I'd like to share it with my son and give him room to grow into the business he wants to be so he can move into a commercial building. So I appreciate you listening to what I have to say. And I guess until you ask for somebody to be called up, I'm the only one that speaks, right? So you have to request if anybody for or against, and then they can, so my son can speak then.
Yes, sir.
I will say one other thing. We lived on Pelican for 34 years, raised our family there, small house, had it just the way my wife wanted it. She didn't want to move. I wanted to move to a bigger place. I wanted a big garage, and one of the ways I was able to talk her into moving was, hey, we can help Kyle. My wife and I, we can't help our kids very much, but we'll do anything for them. And we could see this as a way we could help our son. So I talked her into it, And it's been hard. We've worked very hard to make that property look nice. And we don't want anything we do to be an eyesore. We want any of our neighbors that need to express their concerns to us to feel free, even after today, to come to us and say, hey, you know, could you get that old salt spreader off the lawn over there? It looks like an eyesore. And then we'll immediately move it. I want to be a good neighbor. But I will say this. I talked my wife into moving here from a place that she got just the way she liked it by saying we can help her son. And I'm going to kind of be in a doghouse if we're not able to help my son. I know maybe some people don't find that funny, but you know, happy wife, happy life. And obviously that's not a reason for you to say yes. It's just, it will be a disappointment for my wife, and it will make things difficult for me going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone else speaking for the appeal? You please come, would you sign in? Okay. Come forward and state your name and address to the record, please.
Kyle Cobbs. My address is actually 2669 Kimberly Drive, but I put Springdale on the sign-in form.
Okay.
2669 Kimberly.
Thank you.
I don't have much to add. My dad, I liked everything that he put in the letter. I thought it was very all-inclusive, but you know, it's a difficult thing starting a small business, and there are lots of, just every year there's new things, new challenges that I have to face, from getting payroll employees was a new thing, and just lots of expenses and taxes, and I do work hard to pay all of my employees above market average, and so it sucks a lot of the cash out of the business that I use that to, you know, help pay for my employees and make sure we have nice equipment for them to use, and saving the money on what I was pricing out to be a rental location would be $1,000 at least a month. Saving that money is helping me do all those things. And we don't start before 7:30 in the morning. You know, I think any of the neighbors could probably tell you that we meet there at 7:30, so we'll never be running any kind of heavy equipment before that. And the only equipment that will run is starting a lawnmower to load it onto a truck or trailer, and then we're out of there. And yeah, so it's just employees pull in, grab a truck, grab the equipment that they need, employees leave, and then they come back at the end of the day. So yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else speaking in favor? I see none. Anyone speaking in opposition? Please come forward. I'll tell you, I'll call by names. Pat Albrink. You state your name and address for the record, please.
Patricia Albrink, 6455 Springdale Road.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
I sympathize with them, but I've lived in my house on Springdale Road for 55 years, and I have 7 children, and I've done a lot to help them in their lifetime also, but I do not want my neighborhood to become a business center. We have a beautiful neighborhood now where people can do what they want, that's fine, but when you start bringing in businesses, you're not going to have the same atmosphere and the same things in your life as you do now. And I feel for them, but I also know that I do not want to live on a street full of businesses. And if you let one come in, then how many more can come in? That's my biggest question. It's just, they're nice people. I've met her one time when she had her grandchildren on the swing set, and they seem to be very good people. But I really, really do not want a business that close to my home.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Next would be Kathy. Dragonoff, thank you.
I do want to give this to you. It's from a neighbor that was unable to attend tonight. She would want me just to give it to you. It's an adjacent neighbor as well.
Yeah, and since they're not here, I'm not gonna,
That's fine. She just wanted me to turn it in.
I've received
She
it,
wasn't
but we
able-
were not gonna submit it as evidence. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's fine. And yes, they've been very nice neighbors, and we don't have a problem with it, but we live adjacent to their property. Our entire side of our yard abuts theirs. So our biggest problem is the fact that we've lived there 25 and a half years, and it's a very natural area to live in, and it's residential. We don't want commercial. I mean, that's just what it boils down to. We don't have a problem with them and the improvements that were made. I do have a problem with the parking lot that was poured in gravel going back there, and we do have problems with the trucks being parked right on our property line. You know, we understand, we have 4 children too, and we've helped them out quite a bit, but I don't want commercial properties next door to my house, because it'll affect our life and our living, so. And they do start up equipment at 7:30 in the morning. 3 of our children still live at home, they're in college, and in the summertime, it woke them up. You know, I'm a teacher, so I'm off, and I would go run in the morning, and I knew that there were people coming, there were employees coming, they were getting trucks, they were getting equipment. And I understand it's a business, but we're a residential neighborhood, so that's all I've got.
Thank you. And assuming the last name's the same, David Dragonoff?
David Dragonoff, 6487 Springdale. Kathy's husband, same thing. They've lived there for almost 26 years. It's been residential, it's been secluded, and this new change will affect our way of life and living that we've dreamed about for our life and have been living that dream. And having commercial property next to us will not only affect our property values, but will affect our way of life and the residential life that we've been living. Thank you.
Thank you. Give me a second, I'm making a note. Larry Metz?
I'm sorry, I signed that, and I guess I didn't realize what I was signing.
Okay, thanks, sir. That's fine. You don't have to speak. About John Kallenberger?
He is the next meeting.
Okay, John, you're on the wrong list. I got Chris Idalou.
I think the previous.
Address for the record, please.
My name is Chris Edelin. I
Edelin,
live at
thank you.
6530 Springdale Road.
Thank you, sir.
And I think that the previous 2 speakers pretty much summed up my opinion as well. The property next to mine is about 10 acres, and we moved out there for the privacy, for the, the quiet, and just the fear that if this goes through, then there'll be more development that could be right next to me for industrial or commercial use. It's not something that I dreamed of when I moved into a residential neighborhood. And with that, I will yield the floor.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
I see no one else that has signed in. Is anyone else wishing to speak for or against? I see none. Can I have a motion to close the public portion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion's been made. Can I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I see none. Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Bartol?
Yes.
Mr. DeMoss? Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. All right, now we come to the question portion. So, Mr. Seidel, would you like to start us off? Do you have any questions you'd like to ask the applicant or anyone that spoke?
No, sir, not at this time.
Okay. Mr. DeMoss?
No, sir.
Ms. Owens?
No question.
Mr. Bartle?
Yes.
Thank you.
If you could come back up, please, thanks.
So I was just curious, or this might be for either one of you, but, so how much equipment is presently on the property? And how many trucks, how many trailers?
Come all the way to the podium, please. Thank you.
So currently, we operate one landscaping truck, which is a truck with a dump trailer, one and two mowing trucks. One truck is a trailerless setup, and then the other truck has a trailer for the mowers. And we would not be able to be any larger at this location than what we are now, which is 6 employees, 3 trucks.
3 trucks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, 2 landscaping, or 2 mowing, 1 landscaping.
And your employees would come and get those in the morning?
Right.
Okay. And then there's miscellaneous equipment. I mean, to meet zoning, they're allowed to have that on their property, right?
To have mowing equipment?
Any kind of landscaping equipment? Or is
Yeah,
it,
for personal inventory.
personal use.
Yeah, you can have that. It's when it comes to commercial grade that you get the home occupation category.
okay. What was the other thing? Oh,
Be totally clear, I have a truck. I don't want that to be mistaken as,
no, that's
And
fine.
there's one personally owned truck on the property as well. That's not
Sure.
owned by a business.
Okay.
but I think as far as mowing equipment, maybe to give more detail to your question, there's 2 52-inch right standers, there's 2 Exmark walk-behind mowers, and there's 2 22-inch personal pace mowers, and then 6
Blowers and trimmers.
blowers and trimmers, a couple of chainsaws,
Yeah.
and then parts for all of that.
Okay. All right. One question for staff.
Yes, sir.
The 10.3.1F that says the home occupation shall not employ any person on the premises, does that mean a person who's on the premises like full-time or?
So it's stating that if people, I believe that's saying anyone unrelated that they'd want to employ. Currently, that our resolution prohibits that. And then if there's anyone not living on the premise as well, I think that is also prohibited.
Residency
Whether
or
it's immediate
relative?
family or not. So the only people that could be employed.
Oh, or
So-
like family members?
A typical, I guess to give a little bit of clarity, typical home occupations that are approved uses are something like a hair salon. You just do like a 1 unit and you do it kind of like when you're free, more or less. Real estate if you're just a 1-man job.
Taxes,
accountant,
yeah.
It's more or less the home occupation portion of our resolution kind of is more geared towards that. And we're talking about places where you kind of gather and then disperse. That's where the 10.3.2A kind of comes into play.
Okay, thanks. The only other question, just again, how big was your property? How many acres?
7.39 acres.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to add anything now.
Your portion, if it's a question that's been asked, you can address it. So,
Well,
are you addressing any of the questions that we've spoken to?
would this variance constitute a commercial property?
And that'll be one of my questions in a moment, so I'll cover that in a minute.
Okay.
I'm done.
So some of the concerns, business center, trucks on the property line, that would be something you would have to address if this were to be approved. Equipment starting at 7:30 in the morning, I could see that being an inconvenience. It becoming a commercial property is not going to happen. This is going to be a residential property no matter what happens out of today's transaction. And industrial property, the same thing. This is still a residential neighborhood. Would only be a variance to this particular property if we were to grant it to allow him to do the use, and it couldn't go anything beyond whatever the board decides. So to put your mind a little bit at ease, it's not going to be Kroger's coming down the street from you like you have further down the road. So your typical day, you're starting at 7:30 in the morning. You're gathering your equipment up, and it's Kyle, right? Kyle, I'll address this question to you. So your typical day, your employees come at 7 o'clock, you get,
7:30. We meet at 7:30, and then
okay, and then you're loading up the equipment to then take out for the day to whatever the prospective areas you're going to?
yep.
And so you're a family member, so he's precluded, but these are non-residents that are coming to the property to pick up the equipment because they're your employees.
Yep.
And we're saying there's 6 employees, that's not counting your family members, is that 6?
I mean, that's ideal, but as of right now, I only have 2, because, again, it's very difficult to find people who want to work a physically demanding job in the elements. So yeah, as of right now, the plan is to have. I have 3. Okay, I have 3. One starting on Monday, which will make 3, and then I will be doing some of the work myself as well.
Okay. So the landscaping dump truck, is that what I'm hearing?
Dump trailer.
Trailer.
Yeah.
And a mowing truck and a truck with a trailer, did I capture all 3?
Yes.
And then I guess Mr. Cobb will address the driveway being gravelled and along the property line. Is that the only way that this can work for this property? Is there any way you can give your neighbors a little more distance?
Yeah, so the driveway, the actual driveway that existed before before we made any changes, it sits right at the property line, which is where we have been parking the truck because the parking lot has been under construction and it hasn't been large enough to pull the truck down. But now that the construction is finished, the truck can now be moved down and parked into the lower parking lot, not up against the property line. But again, the parking where the truck is parked was a part that already existed. It was not added by us to add an extra parking spot up against somebody's property line.
And what is the company name?
Cobb's Care LLC.
So it's not a landscaping company.
It's Cobb's Care LLC, Lawn Care and Landscaping.
So it is landscaping, okay. All right,
Yes, currently where the dump trailer is, as he said, is a spot that was there before. It had like I don't know, like a
Yeah.
carport that we tore down. And was the only place we could park the the dump trailer. But as soon as we get the lower area, properly,
graded.
graded, yes, thank you. As soon as we get that properly graded, we can move that from the property line. We didn't realize that was an eyesore for the neighbors.
Well, I think it's more of a sound thing, it sounds like to me, that,
Oh,
as well as having truck along their property. All right, I don't have any further questions. Anyone else from this board? Would anyone like to make a motion?
Well, before that, are we allowed to ask staff
Certainly.
about, well, or maybe it's for the board, so I don't know. I mean, they had mentioned, they're just, he's trying to get his feet on, get the business running, and there's expenses, blah, blah, blah. Are we allowed to put a time limit to this if we voted for it? Like, we'll give you a year to get your expense, your income revenue generating, and then after
The
you,
variance goes with the land, so
so, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's the other issue. If it goes with the land and then he doesn't have the business 6 months from now, this property will still be allowed to have a home occupation, right?
I think we could specify what kind of use it would be.
Yeah, you might be able to get more fine-tuned with that. I would, if Mr. Solon were here, I'd probably defer to Mr. Solomon in this case. Let me see if there's anything the variance would read.
I had another question. So the equipment, is everything stored outside, or is what's that status?
So with the very limited, there's no, the way the current garage or the previous garage was set up, you couldn't fit any vehicles in it. So mowing equipment went into the garage to stay out of the weather, and then trucks stayed out. But now that we have a larger garage, ideally, everything other than the truck with the trailer will go into the garage, equipment and trucks included.
So the truck with the trailer would stay out, but the mowing truck and the landscaping dump would go in?
Yeah, so the other,
We do have a graded spot beside the building on the west side that we plan on putting gravel there, and we could park the dump trailer there. But I think we might have trouble getting the dump trailer into the building. So it would be outside, but it would be far away from the neighbors and far back from the road.
Okay. I have no other questions. I yield again. So did you have more questions for staff?
I have questions for staff. So you said the variance goes with the property?
Yes, traditionally, so
So if for whatever reason the property was to change hands, this particular property would have a variance that a business could be occupied on it?
it would.
It had to be
if-
very
if it
specific.
wouldn't- Yeah, it would have the exemptions from those three specific points. So again, if it was a similar use to kind of what they're describing, then they could do that. So it could be another landscaping business or something of similar use, not necessarily landscaping. It could serve as a gathering point. That would be the big key is probably 10.3.2A. It kind of encapsulates everything it doesn't want in a home occupation, and they'd get an exemption from that portion of our zoning resolution, which
Now, with that, though, we could put an exemption in there if it changed ownership, that it would revert back to its original state.
I would
We can.
defer to your judgment on that one.
Because it's a deed change at that point. So when the deed changes, then it could revert back to its original occupancy.
Sure. From my understanding, that would be correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, that would be something that you would have to make sure you wrote in if you were going to make a variance, that would be stated as if ownership of the property changes hands, that it reverts back to its original state. Go ahead.
Another addition to, if there were a motion to make an approval, currently, I do not believe we've received any application for the parking in the rear. So with that, we would need to receive a certificate to make sure that is, they have the zoning certificate for that specific portion.
Okay. So is that like a permit that you're looking for there?
Correct. So yeah, traditionally, any expansion of a driveway or parking surface, you would go to our office, get a zoning certificate to do that work.
Is gravel an improved surface?
If you're over an acre, you're allowed to have gravel.
Okay.
As traditionally, again, we encourage concrete or asphalt, but if you're over an acre, we cannot.
I know we've had that come before, and I know we wanted a hard surface in almost every case, but I wasn't sure if that was
Sure.
set in stone.
That would be ideal, yes.
Okay. All right, any other questions for staff?
No, but I was just thinking if it weren't to pass, I guess they always have the option of like dividing the lot and selling 2 acres to get some money to use for, rent of a legitimate space or something like that. I'm just thinking,
Put a resident on the land that's an employee?
you can subdivide the lot just to gain revenue, but I don't know what the topo's like, if it's even buildable in that back. You could have
Slopes to the
a,
highway pretty hard.
does it? Oh, is this going towards the freeway?
I thought it was, that you guys are,
Well, north, isn't north up?
oh, it's the opposite.
Yeah, it is. The building is currently
Yeah, north
located
side.
about, I want to say here.
What is? Oh, the,
The current building and the parking,
okay,
it would probably be here, I would suppose.
oh, okay. And then it slopes down.
Uh,
Yep, okay. Just brainstorming, that's all. Nothing more from me. Anything else? Anybody?
Anybody want to make a motion?
Well, I'll make a motion to deny the variances as stated in the proposal.
Okay, motion been made. Any second?
Second it.
Second's been made. Discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mr. Bartol,
Yes.
Mr. Saida, or Mr. DeMoss,
Yes.
Mr. Saito,
Yes.
Mr. Berto.
No. Okay. We will need to bring Mark back in for our next case. Mr. DeMoss, you are excused.
Thank you.
So your case did not pass. You would deny the variance. Just so you know.
Would you like me to retrieve Mr.?
Yeah, if you don't mind.
I can go out and get him.
Mr. DeMoss will take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. DeMoss.
Where's the next one?
Mr. Kallenberger, are you supposed to be for the Colerain Avenue one? Okay. I'm going to write your name on here. Okay. Back to a full board. Next case, BZA 2023-3. The applicant is requesting, the property owner is requesting an expansion of a non-conforming use. This is at location at 7200 Colerain Avenue, parcel number 510-0074-0013-00. The applicant is John Kallenberger. The property owner is Frank's Mott's Auto Body Incorporated. Does the staff have a presentation?
We do. The screen appears to have taken a little bit of a break.
Okay.
I can verbalize it, or we can wait for the projector to come
Oh,
on. It's up to you.
Everyone has the packet. If you want to talk to the packet that we've been provided, that's fine with me.
Sure. And I will check back with our dear friend, Mr. Projector, here in a moment.
All right.
All right. So as you stated, the application, for the application information, the case is BZA 2023-03. The applicant, who is representing the property owner, is requesting the expansion of a non-conforming use. The location is 7200 Colerain Avenue. The applicant is Mr. John Kallenberger, and the owner is Frank Mott's Auto Body. There we go. If you would like to look at the screen, you're able to use now. So it's located in the southeastern portion of the township, very close to the border there, in the middle of Groesbeck. Here's a vicinity map, kind of giving you an idea of where it is. They're it's almost directly at the corner of Colerain and Banning, and there are two adjacent properties kind of related to this, located off of Banning, that we will touch on later. This is the current zoning in the area, so it is directly adjacent to B3 on all portions, although there's R6 and R7 in the direct vicinity. This is the property. Here's an aerial for you. And then these are the two parcels that we will kind of talk about in a second. And then again, just a zoomed in version, just showcasing the B3, again, being directly immersed in that zoning district. Property lines just kind of indicating where you can find all those. The topography, there's a bit of a drop off kind of in the property. Towards the front of the Colerain Avenue property. It's pretty significant. Here's an arrow from Google Street View. Just can kind of get an idea of what it is. Very sunny that day. And then here are the other two parcels off of Banning Road that we will be discussing. So Article 11 for nonconforming uses. We'll be addressing the expansion of a nonconforming use in 11.8.1. 11.8.2, 11.8.3, 11.8.4, and then the applicant is proposing to restore the building and use to the last known use of the property. The applicant has also shared an interest in removing the off-premise sign and combining the two adjacent non-conforming lots, which would bring the property closer to conformity. The proposed use of the property's automotive service, which is an allowed use in B3, and there is no plan to expand the building footprint at all. There is a residential building on one of the adjacent lots. I believe it's at 2970 Banning Road. And the applicant has considered preserving the building and use of that, which is allowed in B3. If the lots were consolidated, it's allowed as an accessory dwelling unit in B3. So here are site plans of the different parcels. This is the one for 7200 Colerain Avenue. You can see the building, the existing accessory structure, and the impervious surface there. Same here as well. You can. This is where the existing house is located. And then this is the proposed signage that was given to staff. The signage allowed for B3 and this parcel would be about a 10 by 10. And this is what would proposed to look like. Variant in your packet is the variance review criteria. Obviously, we're talking about an expansion of non-conforming use, but it's still helpful when looking at the case. And then obviously the Duncan factors. So staff's findings, is staff's opinion that the property in question will not yield a reasonable return without the expansion of the use. It is staff's opinion that the request itself is not substantial in nature. It is staff's opinion that the essential character of the neighborhood would not be substantially altered, or whether adjoining properties would suffer a substantial detriment as a result of the expansion of the use. It is staff's opinion that granting the expansion of the use would not adversely affect the delivery of governmental services. It is staff's opinion the property owner who purchased the property did have knowledge of the zoning restrictions. It is staff's opinion that the property owner's predicament feasibly cannot be obviated through some method other than the expansion of the use. And it is staff's opinion that the spirit and intent behind the zoning requirement would be observed and substantial justice done by granting the expansion of the use. With that, staff's recommendation is for approval with the following conditions: that the 3 lots in common ownership would consolidate to 1, that the residential building located at 2970 Banning Road be allowed as an accessory dwelling unit per subsection 10.2.4A1C, that the off-premise sign be removed from the property at the conclusion of the current advertising contract, that the approval of the requested variances by Colerain Township Board of Zoning Appeals would become null and void in 1 year of the effective date of the approval unless the required applications for all necessary zoning certificates had been received by the development department. And that ends staff's report.
Thank you. The applicant present?
I had a question first for staff.
Okay.
So how many conditions were there? Because I'm looking at the older printout. Are there 4 or 5?
So there are 4.
4 now? Okay.
When that packet was sent out, staff found, I guess to perhaps shed some light, the residential building is kind of just an option. He expressed the possibility of using it for some different circumstances, whether for his son or he does philanthropic work. So perhaps he could utilize it for that. And then staff found this portion in 10.2.4, which allows us to do that per the Board of Zoning Appeals. So since we're in front of you, and to avoid coming back for any reason.
So there's 4 total.
The 4 on the screen would be the ones that would be our conditions for approval.
Okay. I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Kallenberger, do you have a presentation? Okay.
I have your presentation if you'd like it. You sent one in to staff if you'd like to use it.
Okay.
Sure. All right.
Just to state your name and address for the record.
Which address would you like, my home or this address?
The one that you've put on the paper.
Okay. John Kallenberger, 7638 Mara Rossberg Road.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is kind of full circle for me. You know, I'm from Colerain, went to Colerain High School, actually got my first job in auto body at Northgate Chrysler Plymouth.
built True Quality Collision the first time with 13 units. We were the 26th largest in the nation, and we sold to somebody who I think was just here, Caliber Collision. And my non-compete is now up, and I had no intention of getting back into this industry, to be honest. I'm on to other things, but we bought a Chevy dealership in Troy, which had a body shop, and my insurance company's kind of latched back on, not happy with the state of things around town, and are asking me to rebuild and expand. One of their main point of interest was Colerain. So it's kind of the one that I dialed in on, knowing that this building has been sitting here for a substantial amount of time, and something that we could recreate, fix up, make it look the way it's supposed to be with the offices, the grounds, and it'd be a very simple transition into it to get something going rather quickly for the needs of the insurance companies. So we're pretty much just proposing, you know, repainting, redoing the roof, the blacktop, making it, we liked a very high-end look in our facilities, which is why Caliber was interested in us. We want to recreate that again, and we're going to be bringing in 15 to 20 positions into Colerain as we grow this. It's the perfect size building for us. We don't really need any changes. The inside is still stable as far as the compressors, the air lines, the lighting, you know, everything can pretty much stay the same. It's just really recreating a building that's been sitting vacant and turning it back into something that's profitable for us and for Colerain.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor of this appeal? I see none. Anyone speaking in opposition? I see none. Can I close the public portion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion's been made and second.
Second.
Second's been made. In discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Bartle?
Yes.
Mr. Shup?
Aye.
Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Okay. Mr. Seidel, do you have any questions?
I just have one. What would be I think the purchasing of the two properties on Banning is a great idea, but what is the plans with the existing house there at Banning?
That's a great question. I don't really know yet because I've not even been in it. I know that it has been vandalized. I know copper's been stolen out. I know the AC unit was stolen. And it's kind of all or none with Frank. So he's a little bit later in age, a little bit grumpy, and you know, I really don't have interest in the house, but it's part of the deal if I want to get it. So to know that, not even being inside of it, whether it needs to be torn down, whether it needs to be, I've not been in it. I do have some ideas as far as, you know, all the way down to one of my previous managers kind of stated, hey, I've got great equity in my house. I would love to cash in on the market and then wait for the market to go back down to reinvest. Would it be something I could live in? I even thought about my 19-year-old son that is now in the industry. But I've also thought about, to be honest with you, and I don't know how you guys will feel about it, but you know, one of the things that I got into after the sale was I work heavily with Hope Over Heroin and a rehab center in West Side. And one of the things that I do is I mentor the men that go through the 10-month program. So in my restaurants, in my car wash, in our construction company, I then take them out after the 10, I've got apartments in Lebanon, and we recreate the childhood that they missed, how to spend money, how to save money, how to get their license back, and we build them up where they're now running my restaurants, they're getting married, they're buying houses, and this could be an avenue for a graduate house for them to work in the body shop and learn a trade, where I could have a place where I can control them right on site to keep eyes on them and help them get back into society. So that's something else that we've talked about with it.
That all your questions, Mr. Seidel?
Yes.
Mr. Shep?
Yeah, I just have a question for staff. Under the B3s,
Just stay up there. You'll have another question too.
under the B3 zoning, if Mr. Kallinger decided to make it a rental property, is that permissible?
That is an excellent question.
Be a multi-use.
That is a good question.
No. Let me see. It would be 10.3.2. I don't think it distinguishes between whether or not you could add that as part of the condition perhaps if you want. I don't know if that's possible.
I don't see it being a violation of anything.
I don't think that we could limit that.
It was merely a question, not an objection.
Well, yeah, and maybe to speak to it a little bit more, the way the condition is framed is, again, I know that he wasn't all in on refurbishing the house. So it would just make it an allowed use. That building would become an allowed use. So he would still have the ability to just knock it down, turn it into parking, or he could refurbish it into a home. But to answer your question, I don't believe we could curb the rental nature of it.
It's business.
Yes.
And I will say that if it has good bones, it's an asset. I don't want to just knock it down. If it's something, even if it isn't a living dwelling, it could be an insurance company. It could be, there's a lot of things that it could still have life with. I'm not real big on just knocking down assets if just, I don't need parking. I've got plenty of parking there and things. So it's just something that we're evaluating.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I had.
So,
I was just thinking it could be a landscape company.
No,
well, I'd yeah, go ahead, Ms. Owens.
no questions.
No question. Mr. Bartle?
No questions.
I don't have a question, I have a statement. If the house is to remain, I would prefer it, be cleaned up and
Oh, it would be.
be nice.
That's just how we do business. It would be stripped down, repainted, new flooring. I've got a brand new AC unit and everything sitting in one of my garages. It would be put back to the proper way, as we'll do with the entire property. And one thing I should note is I do have a letter, which I did not get from Frank yet. He has already responded to the billboard company. The lease was up in April. So he terminated the lease for the billboard. Now, what I don't know is the contract, if he was within, if it was 60 days, 90 days, what the stipulations of his contract were, but he has had a lawyer send a letter to them terminating the contract at this point.
Which I'm elated about, getting rid of a billboard. I mean,
Because that thing's big, and that's not gonna be fun to get rid of.
yeah, well, you can get a lot of scrap out of it. We're making him consolidate parcels. Is that prudent for the house to be consolidated into this business?
So I believe all of the parcels are non-conforming. The purpose of kind of consolidating the house, if it remains, it would still be under that non-conforming umbrella. So any changes to it would need to come back to BZA. So it seemed like the best kind of way to make this easier for everybody.
And typically, I'm all for consolidating, but in this particular case, that the house, I mean, very easily could be sold to somebody else, but then, so they could use it for a rental or, like you said, an insurance company. And if you consolidate it, now he's got to go back to the trouble of, taking it apart. And
Yeah, and I would say that would, again, become challenging because it's zoned B3 and then it's surrounded by B3, so you couldn't really, it'd be very difficult, I would say.
yeah, it would have to be a business
Yes.
again.
I would say that I and Jared have kind of looked at this a lot. It seems like this is the easiest course of action, again, to give flexibility as far as if he wants to knock it down, he's free to knock it down, or if it would become a residential use, this would be the easiest way to kind of navigate that.
It has to be something.
Yeah.
I can't allow it to sit there vacant because then it's just a huge liability, not only for the company, but any work we do to it will be voided by theft and it sits right now. So
Yeah.
something will be done with it. If we own it, then either someone will be staying there to protect it or something kind of business with security to keep things safe.
Did I walk over your question?
No, are you saying by consolidating the lots that helps the overall feel of these individual properties, or I'm still trying to get a sense of what's the advantage to consolidating?
It's the specific use of the house. So because the house, it's that
Well,
specific parcel
yeah.
is a non-conforming parcel. So any modifications to the structure inside of that would need to come back to BZA.
Well, but as one of your conditions, you want to consolidate.
Sure. Well, yeah.
And so I'm just wondering, is that a critical thing to do?
It's not critical, but I think it brings it closer to conformity, and then it makes it easier. Again, for future sale.
Just thinking of the pros and cons, is it something we,
It is actually something that, when we've taken our zoning courses and classes, Hamilton County wishes for us to do it. It makes it easier to send out one tax bill versus 3 tax bills. And then it also, it helps as far as your property lines, your boundary lines. Now you've got 2 less boundary lines to have to deal with. So
Well,
that's why they asked us to do it.
Sure. And in this specific case, instead of having 3 BZA cases, you would move to 1 BZA case.
Right, right.
Again, the idea with nonconformities and conformities is you want to bring everything as close to conformity as you can. Obviously, it's very challenging, especially along Colerain Avenue. So just any opportunity that we can eliminate off-premise signs and consolidate, get parcels into closer to conformity, we try to
Yeah, okay.
advise that when we can.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, the billboard would make a nice roof. I heard that, I heard the roof was leaking on that property. It is. Yeah. All right, you have any other questions? Any other questions for our board? I have none. Do we have, someone would like to make a recommendation or a motion? I can't because I'm chair. So
And
you're the vocal one, go and do it.
Motion that we approve the variance as cited.
Okay, we have motions been made to approve the appeal as staff's recommendation. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Second's been made. Any discussion? See none, roll call vote.
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Bartol?
Yes.
Mr. Shutt?
Yes.
Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Okay, unfinished business, I see none. And we need approval of the minutes for the February meeting.
Correct.
Looks like someone like to make a motion.
I'll
to
make a
approve.
motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second it.
Motion and second been made. Any discussion? I see none, roll call vote.
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Bartol?
Yes.
Mr. Shutt?
Yes.
Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Next meeting is April 26th. We do have a case,
We have 2 cases.
2 cases. And you got administrative matters, the BZA bylaws.
Sure. So enclosed in your packet was possible amendments to the BZA bylaws. As we've kind of talked about them the last couple meetings. The first one, changing the organizational meeting to January as opposed to February to kind of line up with when members are elected or re-elected, and just to kind of come into consistency with the rest of the boards. So that's a minute change. And the other one, up on the board, kind of, we talked about how minutes are taken. I observed a couple organizations and how they take minutes. And then that in combination with Mr. Roberto kind of giving his understanding of minutes through his training, I proposed these changes. More or less, how it breaks down is you indicate the name, address, and nature of the appeal of the applicant, whether the appeal was granted, denied, or tabled, the conditions of the appeal, if the appeal was granted, votes for and against the granting of the appeal. Then the minutes would also include anyone who spoke in favor or for or against the appeal in the public hearing. It more or less condenses it, again, trying to move more towards a minutes construction of how we're doing things as opposed to a transcript. And if you would like those, we can vote on those tonight, or
I can't make a motion to it, but I'll vote on it.
Do we need a motion?
Yeah, please make a motion as to whether or not you like this amendment to the bylaws and whether or not it would be approved.
I make a motion to approve the amendment to the bylaws.
Okay?
I'll second it.
Motion and second made. Any discussion? I see none. Roll call vote.
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Barkle?
Yes.
Mr. Shutt?
Yes.
Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I see no other to discuss, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion's been made, no, a second?
Second.
Second's been made, discussion? None, roll call vote?
Ms. Owens?
Yes.
Mr. Barkle?
Yes.
Mr. Shutt?
Yes.
Mr. Saito?
Yes.
Mr. Roberto?
Yes. Meeting is adjourned.